Hello and welcome. My name's Phillida Rodich and I'm a Planning Director at the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage working in the Reform team. The purpose of today's session is to provide an overview of the reforms relating to the West Australian Planning Commission that are included in the Planning and Development Amendment Bill 2023, which was introduced by the Government into Parliament on the 18th of October. The session will provide an overview of the legislative reforms included in the bill and provide them in context with a broader review of the WAPC that was completed in 2022 and is published on the Department and Commission website. The review of the WAPC stemmed from a recommendation in the Government's Action Plan for Planning Reform, Initiative C9. The purpose of this reform is to look at changes to the structure, functions and operations of the WAPC to increase its transparency and efficiency and enable a greater focus on strategic planning matters. That recommendation itself came from the earlier Green Paper on Planning Reform prepared by the independent reviewer appointed by the Government. That sought a review of the Commission to reposition it as a more streamlined and independent technical authority. It looks to address issues with an unwieldy structure, conflicting priorities and clunky outdated mechanics governing the Commission's operation. The Action Plan recommendation recommends that the Chair undertake a review of the Commission to look at options including an independent WAPC board of 7 to 10 members down from its current 15, more flexible, agile committee structures to respond to needs as they arise, fit-for-purpose arrangements for technical agency input into Planning Commission deliberations and decisions, clear arrangements for the WAPC's role in key land use planning and infrastructure coordination activities that sit outside the scope of IWA or Infrastructure Western Australia, which was being established at the time of the Action Plan being released, and also changes to the servicing and resourcing arrangements between the Commission and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage to support strategic planning and policy development focus. Feedback on the Green Paper, which informed the content of the Action Plan, was broadly supportive of the recommendations and the improvements proposed to the Commission, though inevitably some different views about the specifics of how that should be delivered were expressed, and those were considered and incorporated into the review process. The review that's been undertaken in 2022 took the Action Plan direction as a basis, a brief if you like, for review of the WAPC and sought to develop further more detailed recommendations. The review process undertaken in 2022 really built on the direction of the Action Plan and involved a review of past feedback and context, a review of interstate models, interviews with over 70 individuals and bodies engaged with the planning process in some way, shape or form, including current and past members of the Commission, interstate counterparts, peak and industry bodies, academics, staff and other people who are recommended through participants throughout the process. The review process involved identification of different options which were workshopped by the Planning Commission and its standing committee members and ultimately generated a recommended preferred option for the Commission moving forward and 46 interrelated recommendations relating to the structure and the operation of the Commission. Whilst those 46 recommendations do all interrelate and complement one another, they individually and collectively look at advancing improvements in efficiency, efficacy, strategic focus, transparency, governance, including consistency and clarity, and legibility. Some of the recommendations require legislative change, and those are the recommendations that we're going to talk about in detail in a moment and which are incorporated into the bill, and some of them are purely operational. They can be undertaken now, and indeed some of them are being introduced as we speak. In terms of a quick overview of those 46 recommendations, in very brief summary, they include a recommendation to rationalise the list of functions allocated to the Commission within the Act, removal of unnecessary operational details from the Act into regulations to make it more agile, clarification of roles in terms of the Minister's power to instruct the Commission and in terms of the Commission versus its committee's focus, updated selection criteria and process for Commission board members with a focus on skills and expertise, a recommendation for open calls for nomination to board appointments and publication of both the selection criteria and the appointed board members' profiles to increase transparency, amendments to the membership to reduce it down to 7 to 9 members, with Directors General taking a non-voting role in Commission deliberations, the option for multiple deputies to support the chairperson, rationalisation of the committee structure and WAPC oversight of its committees, regular reviews of delegation of authority and reporting through a simplified process, Improve strategic planning and collaboration mechanisms. A statement of the Commission's role moving forward in terms of infrastructure coordination to complement the role of IWA, and a revised reporting program. The review also recommended further consideration of transparency improvements which could be introduced to complement those that were introduced in 2020. The recommendations are all complementary and recognise the vast role and needs for more improved efficiency in the Commission to manage the mass of detail and to free the Commission up to increase its focus on strategic planning. It recognises that the Commission needs to work well with the Department as its support agency and with other government agencies and local governments rather than in silos to deliver good outcomes. So in terms of those recommendations that require legislative change, I'll run through those individually, one per slide effectively. The first recommendation was around rationalising the list of Commission's functions, which requires an update to Section 14 of the Planning and Development Act. The changes proposed in the bill here are not about fundamentally changing the functions of the Commission, but rather how they're described to increase their legibility, as this was a common point of confusion in discussing Commission roles with participants, particularly those who are having a sort of a broader interface with the Commission. The changes proposed through the bill include a more complete listing of WAPC functions, an attempt to group like functions together, so strategic functions together, statutory functions together, and so forth. Inclusion of key omissions, including the Commission's key statutory functions. At the moment, subdivision is not recognised as a function in the list of functions ascribed to the Commission, albeit it's a core responsibility, so inclusion of those omissions, and a more explicit reference to the Commission's plan-making function, which is only referenced in passing terms. That change also ties to the reform initiatives promoting a stronger role for the Commission in state-led district structure plans. A second area of change relates to how the board's operational details are managed and recommends the relocation of some of the mechanics, if you like, into regulation, reflecting more contemporary practices. This requires updates to sections 11 and 19 to enable the preparation of regulations to guide the operation of the Commission board and the operation establishment of its committees, and the deletion of Schedules 1 and parts of Schedule 2 which currently contain these details. The drafting of regulations hasn't yet commenced, but would essentially take the starting point of what's being removed from Schedules 1 and 2 and an update to those. That review process and translation to regulations may include some refinements, such as more explicitly making provision for virtual meetings and such like. It's in order to keep abreast of those kinds of changes that the suggestion's been made that detail is better off in regulation than in the Act itself. Another recommendation that's incorporated into the Planning and Development Amendment Bill relates to the clarification of roles. This involves an update to Section 13 of the Act to clarify the role of the board and really state what is implicit and understood to be its role, including providing leadership, promoting an efficient and effective planning system, and promoting integrated and sustainable development. The proposed Section 13 includes an expectation that the Commission act expertly and impartially, which, as I said, is a commonly understood function, but is put in there to provide that clarity and address that point of confusion that sometimes exists as to what its role is. The recommendations here also include an update to Section 17 to clarify the Minister's capacity to instruct the Commission on statutory determinations, and again, essentially provide clarification reflecting a long-standing understanding that the Minister may provide broad directions to the Commission, but where the Commission is the determining authority, such as with subdivision applications or what have you, that instruction should not extend to instructing the Commission on what determination or what conclusion it is to reach. The updates to the board's makeup, its constitution, incorporated in updates to sections 10 and 11 of the Act, and include amendments to the membership of the board to reduce the numbers down to 6 to 8 members plus a chairperson to create a greater agility, if you like, and a very focused, smaller group of members, to specify that the chair and at least one other member of the Commission must be qualified planners, which interestingly is not currently a requirement, and to specify that collectively the remaining members of the board should have relevant experience and expertise collectively in planning, in subdivision of land and property development, in planning and management of infrastructure, in economic, social and environmental policy, and in public sector governance and administration. The draft provisions of Section 10 also specify that at least one member of the board ought to have significant experience in local government, and at least one member of the board should also have significant experience of living and working in the regions. The provisions propose that public servants be ineligible for membership on the board. So as I mentioned before, Directors General would continue to be able to attend meetings to contribute to discussion and provide their expert input into Commission decision making, but would not be voting members as they currently are. The amendments also make provision for more than one deputy to exist to support the chairperson in recognition of the vastness of the Commission's role and the potential efficiencies that might be created through a slightly revised structure. It doesn't oblige that, it just provides the opportunity. These changes look to advance our technically expert board with collective skills and expertise to allow it to cover Commission functions rather than a sort of more representative model as currently exists. This next slide provides a very simplistic graphic representation of that board structure with the chairperson at the top as the qualified planner, plus the 6 to 8 expert members with the curated mix of expertise and skills. The Directors General, the representatives of key agencies and including Infrastructure WA, are shown to the side as non-voting participants in Commission's meetings. In looking at that structure, a whole range of options were workshopped. However, that was the preferred option, taking into account the need for the relevant knowledge, experience and skills, and also the many opportunities that exist for other areas of expertise to feed into Commission decision making and for other referral bodies and agencies to present to the Commission to provide input through other mechanisms. Some minor changes are proposed to the delegation arrangements in the Act to facilitate more efficient and legible delegation. This is important to enable the Commission to get through its vast workload efficiently and effectively and ensure that it can push down more detailed decisions, more minor decisions, particularly where there's a clear policy and strategic framework to inform those and to enable it to increase its focus on strategic planning matters. The amendments involve removing the requirement in Section 16 for delegations to be gazetted and to bring them into effect effectively on publication on the website, and amendments to Schedule 2 to remove the current inhibition on the ability of the Commission to delegate certain metropolitan region scheme functions. We are hoping that those changes will also allow us to publish the Commission delegations in a more user-friendly format on the website. At the moment, the gazettal notices are all published individually, which effectively means you have to read through 15 different notices to get a concept of what delegations exist. By removing the requirement for gazettal, we can look at publishing delegations in a more user-friendly way and have a better oversight of what delegations exist and what opportunities exist to tailor those to current need and priority. In terms of next step, obviously the Planning and Development Amendment Bill is currently under deliberation by Parliament. Assuming that translates into an Amendment Act, it gets finalised and given royal assent, then next steps would involve calling for expressions of interest for a reconstituted board and committees, the preparation of regulations to guide Commission board operations and committee structures, and updating meeting procedures to complement those regulations, the establishment of the new board and committees, which may involve some current members, depending on the appointment process and decisions, and then staged implementation, the non-legislative changes. That program and the timeframe for that will be determined by the government. However, first step is obviously consideration of the bill by Parliament. We are available to answer any queries on those reforms and the recommendations. The email address is provided on the screen, as is a contact phone number. The review of the WAPC from which these recommendations stem is, as I mentioned, published on the WAPC and the Department's website for those people who'd like to read a little bit more background and context for where these recommendations came from. Thank you.